Welcome to the Nav Bar. Simon,
Welcome.
how have you been?
I am good. I am just very upset that you always want to cut the little chit-chat before the podcast, which I think is part of it and people would enjoy.
Yeah, I don't, you guys who are listening only get a very small, narrow band of what the podcast actually is. So the way that, a normal week works is that Simon and I start our catch-up and we're not live. And then we end up talking for, half an hour, 45 minutes. Because we just love talking to each other, and then we're like, all right, cool, we should go live, and then we have a little bit of time where we're just chatting and talking to the people who are joining us live on YouTube, and then eventually we're like, all right, cool, let's start the podcast. Then you get the audio version, but then you get all of that in reverse at the end. We end the audio podcast, and then sometimes we hang around for a little bit on the live broadcast, and then we end up having another. Usually it's longer than the podcast that we end up chatting at the end while we're trying to quickly wrap it up and get back to all of the things that we need to do. We just love talking to each other. It's good that we run a podcast together.
I don't know what's happening. I've got an extra scene in the back. Hello! I've messed up the...
Simon's layering. If you're not watching the video or if you're not joining us live, Simon has somehow layered a version of himself as our background and then us overlaid on top of that. So lots of Simon in this episode.
I don't know what to do anymore. Let's talk and I'll work it out. Can I put just you for a while?
All right.
Let's look at Jon.
Okay, well, I was just about to ask you a question, but I guess I'll jump into me. What have I been doing this week? I fixed our dishwasher. I'm so proud of this. Our dishwasher broke. There was it displayed an error code, and I was really upset that we had to hand wash dishes. I know this is such a stupid thing to complain about, but when you have kids and you've got full-time work and you've got a podcast on the side and you've got all of these things going on, when you have to also factor in hand washing all of the dishes, it just broke me. I felt like I couldn't face having to hand wash these dishes. So we got someone to come out to look at it and try and repair it. And before they had come out, we'd basically run through diagnosing what we thought the problem was, which was to flush out the filters. And the person came out and they looked at it and they were like, yep, these filters look clean. That's all I can do. Here's a $200 bill. Thank you. And I was so frustrated. And his attitude was basically yeah, we could swap this other part that could be related, but it's probably not going to fix it because it's a 10-year-old dishwasher. And so you should just buy a new dishwasher. And I was like, this problem will be one small thing, one component. And then if we just chuck this whole thing in landfill, if everyone has that attitude, it's just awful. Replace the small piece that needs to be replaced and then keep using the dishwasher probably for another 10 years. And so after he left, I did some more research and I was fueled by anger and frustration and contempt for them charging me $200 to just basically tell me that I shouldn't bother fixing it and should get a new one. Anyway, ended up finding the part that I was pretty sure needed to be replaced. And then ordered it from the company's website, from their parts website, and got the part back to the house and had installed it and repaired the dishwasher before they even sent me a quote for what the part that they said probably wouldn't even fix it, which did fix it. And so I feel fantastic about defeating the evil dishwasher repair company whose job it is to fix these things and keep these things alive so that people don't just go out and buy another $1,000, $2,000, whatever white goods appliance that also doesn't need to exist while this one just gets chucked in landfill.
Oh, and the landfill is massive. It's this biggest appliance in your house, basically. The fridge is taller, but the washing machine is deep.
Exactly. And even if you just think about even just the metal in this, there's so much stuff in this big box that just gets chucked in the bin.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. There's my
rant.
My rant.
It allowed me to fix
the state of the world. Back in my day, we used to fix our appliance. And now that Simon's back, I'd love to hear about. You have been on a basketball tour recently.
Oh,
right?
yes.
If you want to talk about this.
Yeah. To make it a real tech podcast. So last week was there's a thing called PSSA, Primary School Sports Association. So kids up to age 11-ish, when they go to year 6, is primary school in Australia. And you can participate to this event before, but obviously you compete with the year 6 kids. So there was a few year 5 like superstars. But what happened is my son made the local school basketball team, and then this team tries for the PSSA regional against other kids. There's a 20, 50 people from the little district where you live, and then he made that team, and then they do the regional stuff. In our case, that was like the region from Coffs Harbour to Ballina, which is about 2 hours drive stretch. And he made that team. And then the next round was the North Coast, which is Port Macquarie to Queensland, which is now a good 6 hours stretch of coast if you drive, and inland also. And he made that team again, which means he made the final bus, not really the final bus, but he made the state team, which is going to compete against other New South Wales state teams for the state championships. And that was a whole week competition. So we represented the North Coast, and then there's the Sydney and South Coast and Western New South Wales. And basically the whole state has little defined regions with a team of 10 players that represent them. And my son was in the North Coast one, it's pretty cool. Like I know Australia is big and stretched, but it's a region that is maybe 5 times bigger than Switzerland, my country of origin, and he made the 10 players representing that team, which is pretty cool. So amazing. I was down in Newcastle, which is a couple of hours north of Sydney, for that tournament, and I took a whole week holiday, no work. I wanted to be able to be completely present because it's my son and it's basketball and it's all my life, and I was like, I didn't coach the team.
He even took the week off of the nav bar, guys. You gotta understand, this was really, really important to Simon.
Yeah, I considered that one. Considered joining from the sideline, showing the game. But yeah, that was a great tournament. You realize very quickly that any team that has the word Sydney in it is going to be an absolute powerhouse, because there's 6 million people living in Sydney. Sydney has Sydney North, Sydney West, Sydney South, but still every one of these group has more people, more infrastructure, more personal trainers, more money to deploy into development, player development. So unsurprisingly, North Coast is actually quite competitive. We won most games against other regional places, like Surf Coast and a bit inland, but we played 3 different Sydney-based teams, and they roasted us by quite a bit. Actually, we were competitive, but they still ended. Like, basketball is one of these sports where good teams go on mini runs where they steal the ball, steal the ball again, score again, timeout. And they did that to us multiple times, so you end up with like losing by 20 or 30, even if the game feels close. But that was a great experience. And at the end of the week, I knew from the start my son would not make it because of his height. He's an elite player for his age, but he's hasn't hit that puberty, big growth, whatever, that some kids in the tournament clearly, some of them were by far taller than me, who's like a 43-year-old, 6-foot adult, 5'11", okay, but there's some 6+, 6'2", 6'3" dudes. So out of all these teams, that was 140 players, I think, because there's 14 teams of 10. Coaches, like from the state coaches, New South Wales coaches, looked at the games for the whole week and picked 10 players of the whole state to go to the next level, which is like the nationals, which happened on the Gold Coast, which is 2 hours drive from where we live. My son was pretty like, oh, maybe I'll make it. And I was pretty clear. I was like, dude, like, even if you play your best week of basketball, like, I don't think there's much of a chance just because of the size and stuff. And turns out that my son is a point guard, which is usually the shortest player, but fast and good court vision. And the point guard that got selected is as tall as me, or just a bit shorter. And then it goes up from there. So the prediction was kind of correct. It's like a very big, strong team. So yeah, so these 10 players will now, in a few weeks, go play against Queensland and Western Australia and Northern Territory. And like, yeah, it's super cool. Awesome. That is all part of the school system. So, and it's nothing to do with clubs and other things like Manly or my son plays for Coffs Harbour Suns. This one is like the school, private and public schools, primary schools. And then there's another one for the secondary school, but it's obviously year 11, 12. Again, if you're an absolute superstar, you could be in year 7 and play with like 17-year-old boys, but I think you gotta wait a few more years to make that team again. So it's a good opportunity, and I'm super happy I was part of it fully.
Yeah, that sounds great. And like, yeah, for him to get that far at his height. Like, imagine what's going to happen when he does, like, shoot up and become super tall, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe he will be playing for one of the NBL teams or one of the, bigger clubs.
Yeah, so that's what I told him. I said, you're not going to make the team, but I've watched you this week play, and while there's a New South Wales guy with a clipboard in the corner, and I've seen like little head nods, and there's a little. I'm pretty sure there's a circle like, hey, let's watch this space here. This guy's got some pretty good skills. Yeah, he's a good player. I'm very biased, obviously, but he's got the factor of like competitive and speed and talent, and pretty cool.
Awesome. All right, and to bring it back to tech things. All right, we'll talk about some tech things. So there's something that we've wanted to talk about for a while, is that both of our like processes in recording content, or not content, that's a loaded term. What are we calling it?
Educational materials.
Educational materials.
Videos.
Creating educational materials.
Videos. Whatever.
Videos probably changed our process quite a lot since the last time we did an episode on this. Simon has recently been exploring some very interesting stuff, which I would love to hear about. So, Simon, what is your high-level process at the moment for recording videos?
All right, so I haven't really changed the tools that I use. I've just refined my approach. But for me, the biggest struggle is always come up with the design and the idea and the story. But to bring it back to what I've done the week before my basketball tournament, I had all of that done. I did these live workshops with Epic Web, and it's a series of problem, solution, and it's very defined. This is the starting code, this is the end code, this is the challenge. And so I had all this progression of exercise done already that I've delivered in live, not in person, it's on Zoom, but like I've taught it live to an audience. And the next step was to produce a video progression of the same thing. So I had for me, that's all the hard part that takes so much time. And then becomes the fun, but also time consuming part to record and edit the videos. But at least I'm not like spinning my wheels on what should I teach here? What's the design looking like? Who do I need the help from? So I had 71 videos segments. That's a lot. That is a lot. Most of them are short, especially the problem introduction. I'm like, hey, here's where we're at. We want to add this little effect on hover. Read the instruction. Here's a link to help you. Good luck. And sometimes it's like 40-second segment. But then the solution is me walking through. So these typically are like anything between 2 and 10, 15 minutes sometimes. Now, if you've edited a 15-minute YouTube video, you know by itself it can take a couple of hours easily. So I'm going to break down the process and then my discoveries, because I've done 71 of them while working full-time 2 weeks ago. I do not recommend doing that more than a week because I didn't sleep much, I didn't exercise at all, and I barely saw my family. But it was a window for me of I have to do this push, because then I go to the basketball week, and if I start editing during the games, it's going to be a mess, and then I'm lose my momentum. So I set myself to do it, and I did it. So here's how I did it. Now we can finally talk. That was the context.
All right, time to start the podcast.
Welcome to the nav bar. So step one is I verify, because I got burnt before, that I'm having the right audio and camera and screen recording settings. I use the same software that we use now to stream this, which is called Ecamm Live. It's a paid product and it's only Mac. Might not be your cup of tea, but it's essentially what OBS also does. Just you pay money and you get really good ergonomics and nice additions in exchange for the money you pay. You can do it with OBS or QuickTime or whatever. So I record my screen and it records my camera and my microphone. And I press record, I prepare my code, I have my notes on the side screen, and then I hit record and I never stop it. And I got better over time when you hit record, you're going to mess up the first segment 10, 20 times. But if you're live, when I teach the live workshop, I never got stuck on the intro. I was like, hey, let me restart. You have an audience. So I convinced myself that I'm live, and I'm just like, I started telling my head, okay, that's the end of the break. We're going to start. And I press record, and I literally pretend that I'm delivering the workshop, because I'm trying to, the videos should represent as much as possible the real in-person delivery. So basically convinced me to, I'm live now, I've pressed record, I've pressed go live, and I go through it very naturally, actually, just by tricking me like this. and I record the whole segment until I'm done, and then I hit stop. And then what I typically do, because I was doing so many videos, is instead of recording one and editing one, because of recording conditions, the room temperature, the light, everything, I try to record as much as I could in one block until something takes precedence, like work or family or open window, like some
need some oxygen in here. Get rid of the CO2.
So I would be
just to quickly go back, just before you keep going on, just to maybe make it clear to people who don't create content full time, the alternative to recording all of this in a natural way. The reason Simon's saying that is usually, I think both of us try to get these like absolutely perfect takes of every single thing we say throughout an entire video. And so we will say like basically one sentence or maybe like a paragraph at a time, and then we'll stop and wait a sec, and then do the next bit, and then stop and wait a sec. And anytime we mess up, if we say something incorrectly or, trip over a word or whatever, we just take it back to the start of that sentence and go again. So when you get to the editing process, like it's super fast to edit all of those bits out, but because you're going for that like level of perfection, there's a heap of editing that you need to do, and you need to you're basically, cutting up every sentence in the entire video. And so, like Simon said, like a 10-minute video that you're trying to do for YouTube could take like hours of recording and could take hours of editing, because you just keep redoing things until you have it perfect. And so it sounds like your process was to avoid that as much as possible, given you had to create 70 plus videos. And so you were trying to create more of an in-person thing where you can't go back and you can't perfect it. You can't, like, if you mess up a word, you just roll forward, or you correct the word but keep going, which I imagine would make the editing process like way simpler, because then you're essentially just like cutting off the start, cutting off the end, and then maybe doing like a couple of edits in the middle where you really needed to take something out.
That is the ideal world, which I am not in. The whole trick does for me is to be able to get past the first sentence, because I would literally, and I know it's not just me, like I've seen so many people saying, press record and
I have like an hour of the first sentence,
today we're going to,
the rest of it.
Today we you get stuck in that loop because you just hit record. So the going live thing gets me past that first sentence. But then I still go for if I say something wrong, I just pause and I say it again, but I don't stop the recording. So there's still plenty of editing happening, but at least I unblock myself from the cold start, basically. And when you do 71 videos, you don't want to get stuck 71 times at the intro, where some of the videos are literally just the intro and not much else. So that trick kind of helped me start faster, but basically I record as many full segment as I can in one block. Another lesson from life that taught me, where I lost all the recordings, is that instantly after finishing one video, I drag it in a Dropbox folder and it uploads there. So if whatever happens, my computer burns or something, hopefully there's a backup somewhere. I did another thing that's not really useful, but it's mentally useful. I had a Notion to-do and then recorded columns with 71 in the to-do and 0 in the recorded. And every 3 or 4 videos, I would select multiple and drag them in the to-do. And when you move, the done or recorded column grows, but also the other one shrinks. And you can, after a couple of days, you can see when you're about to reach halfway, and this is so mentally satisfying. Even if it's just a recording and then you're going to do the same for editing. Yeah. So I've done all these recordings, and then at different times I would go and tackle the editing part. And this is, I think, where there's interesting things to talk about. I have a 3-pass editing technique. Actually, I should record a video on my process. Because everyone's like, oh, your videos are so polished, and sometimes you're on the side, sometimes you're full screen. What's your process? Here's my process for free on the podcast, in your ears while you drive. Before
as long as you subscribe to the podcast.
Yes.
Hit that subscribe button right now, and then Simon will keep talking.
I'll wait, come on.
All right, we're good.
I'm waiting. Okay, you've hit it. So I drag my camera face and the screen recording. They both have the same audio. That's maybe important. I record the same audio on both, even if it takes more storage. But what it does is I can drag both in my editing software, which is DaVinci Resolve, but you can use whatever you want. This process will likely be the same as long as you have multi-track capabilities. So I have my video face and my screen, and then 2 audio tracks. and I select all of this and I right click and I go synchronize by waveform. That's why you need the audio similar. And why do I need that? Because sometimes there's a little latency. Like I just want my lips and the voice, like I want it to be perfectly sync. Or maybe sometimes I started the screen recording later or whatever, like you can sync and it automatically lines them up for the whole recording. Once I've done that, I delete one of the audio files because I don't want two of them. But I know I have my camera and screen in sync. And then that's where the magic trick, that's what I do. I select both. Pay attention, this is the key moment. I select both the camera and the screen. And I change the zoom level from 100% to 0.66666, so 2/3, 66%, 2/3. Then I move the screen recording to the right by 640 pixels because of the resolution, and it puts it perfectly right aligned. And then I drag my camera, I literally eyeball it. I drag myself until I appear on the remaining space on the left, where it kind of feels balanced, when my shoulders kind of fit the frame. And so that's my like split view. And I edit the entire video like this. And the reason is I can see both. So I'm like, I always kind of have a good idea of what. If you just edit the screen recording, you're like, I wonder if I should put my face next, but then you realize you're like picking your nose while you talk. So you're like, it's no go. So I have my face on the left, the screen on the right with a completely raw recording. And then the next step is, like Jon said, I go through the whole video and I find the spots where I messed up and I said 6 times the same sentence. And I remove the first 5 and keep the sixth one. And then I try to remove the pauses and the and all that stuff. And at this point, I basically go with my ears. I try to edit so it sounds like a good delivery, and I don't really care what happens on the screen. So that's the first pass, basically. I go left, right, and chop, 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 chop. It is literally, for a 10-minute video, it's literally close to 1,000 cuts. Like you say, death by 1,000 paper cuts. I sometimes take a screenshot and tweet. You can see the timeline. It's like you're doing like a very fine zucchini slices. That's what it looks like. Any question on that first pass? Because that's the first and the most time-consuming part of the process. But it sets me up for the success later.
So I think, like, yeah, my process is very, very similar to this in that it's like I record my camera separate from my screen. I make sure that I record both audio sources and then sync them up. Mm-hmm. Something that I've started doing in the section that you were just talking about is not even like listening through the first time. The first time, because DaVinci Resolve has really good tools for like slicing where the playhead is and then ripple deleting. So where you delete a chunk and then it pulls everything forward. I go through like not even listening, but just looking at the waveform and basically manually cutting out all of the silences, which is kind of cool because I can do it like just without having my full focus on it. Like I can have some music on or a podcast or like be doing it while like sitting on the couch with a basketball game or something. I can cut out all of these silences and then I've got this like rough cut that's basically, because the way that I deliver my content, it basically like I remove all of the silences, so it's like pretty much just me talking solidly for like 10 minutes, which is a pretty like standard YouTube style of video. So I found that like that process of going through and doing that kind of just like on autopilot without even actually listening or being engaged in what I'm doing makes it way easier when I come to the next layer, the next cut, because I can then just quickly listen to the start of each clip. And if I'm saying the same thing, then I know I made a mistake and I can just delete that one before it. Now, something else that I wanted to ask is the reason that I've even prompted all of this is I thought that you had changed this process slightly and that you had found a tool that could maybe do exactly what I just talked about automatically.
I'm telling a story here.
You're telling a story.
You have to set the,
no spoilers, man.
You have to set the stage for the pain and the wasted time. And then you can see the value in what comes out.
Okay, continue on with the pain.
But
Simon did this totally manually for every single video for 71 videos.
Well, sort of, like I've done a bunch of it. Because you said what you said, I'm going to bring one thing straight away. If you want to cut silences, as what Jon was saying is like you can visually see the waveform without listening. Basically, there's the audio track has little lines. The louder you speak, the bigger the lines are. And so a silence is just a complete empty middle line, and then every time you talk it makes little waves, and so you can visually see, well, there's nothing here, I can cut before, after. That, my friend, there are today, right now, amazing tools that do it in 1 second. And I am surprised DaVinci Resolve hasn't built that in. One cool tool, it's not a subscription, it's a buy once, forget forever. And I want to buy this. I haven't done it yet, but it seems amazing. It's called Recut. There's someone really active on Twitter, Dave Sedia, I think. I'm not sure of the name. Maybe I'm mixed up with someone. But it's a tool you literally upload the audio, or you upload your files, video, or even if you have 2 of them. You upload your raw recordings, and you can select how much padding you want, just like in CSS. Padding before and after the silence. Otherwise, it cuts like right when the sound stops, and it makes this very TikTok like high pace, intentionally 0 pause between sentences cut, which has value for some short videos. But you can also say, hey, I want half a second or 0.8 seconds before and after, and then you go process, and it goes, it removes all of stuff. Here's the video for download where I've done the work that Jon specifically described. Find the silences and remove them. It does this in 5 seconds, and you just drag the video in and pull it out, and you've done that step. So that would be the first thing.
Amazing. It's so much time saved. Yeah, like that even that process of doing that on autopilot and not paying attention to it, it'll still take like probably half an hour, maybe longer, depending on how many times I've messed up in that video. But like, it still takes a decent chunk of time just sitting there. And like, you're probably extremely likely to develop RSI from doing the same repetitive task over and over for like it's exactly the same hand movement. Like, it's just moving in my case, a trackpad, and then pressing like 1 of 2 keys to either make a slice where I am, or to like ripple cut everything on the left. Yep. And so like that is like just so likely to cause RSI in the future. It's
insane, yeah. Speaking of, you can't see it on screen, but I have a MX Master, the mouse that everyone raves about. If you look at the profile, it's got this crazy shape, but your hand sits on it like if you sit on the rock instead of a flat mouse. And the ergonomics saved, because I was definitely getting this RSI stuff. Another tip on the topic. You heard Jon say ripple delete. If you don't know what it means, ripple delete, it means delete anything that's from where the playhead is to the end of the next clip. So if you've done chop, chop, chop already, and you want to remove a bit, instead of doing a slice and then clicking on the element and deleting it and then dragging everything back to remove the gap you created, you can in one key say delete forwards or delete backwards. And in Resolve, I have my left hand on the Q and W, which is the first 2 letters next to the tab. And I've mapped Q to delete backwards and W to delete forwards. So I move the playhead wherever I want, and I hit Q, and it removes what's before, or I can be super, super fast with that. And that MX Master has that little thumb wheel, horizontal thumb. So to scroll horizontally, I just spin my thumb. So I go spin, 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 Q, spin, 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 Q, spin, spin, W, Q, 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 and I can really quickly do that process. So if you're going to do that, I guarantee you'll save time trying to create some keyboard shortcuts that fit your brain, and then stick to it, because it's life-saving. Yeah,
absolutely. But now you don't even need to, because the robots will develop RSI for you, which is fantastic.
Yes. So let me continue my story. Recut. So I'm going to... I was right. I was right about the name. I'll post the Twitter account in the comments. Dave Sedia is the name of the person creating this. I highly recommend you to check out from his profile. You'll find the getrecut.com. This is awesome. I would love to have Dave on the podcast. Instantly, the reason I haven't bought it yet is because, for me, removing the silences solves about 30% of the problem. The other problem is in a video, especially a 10-minute long edit, which is like 30, 40 minutes of raw recording, in many, many, many places will say the same sentence 3 or 4 times. Or I'll go like, let's add text underline, and I type it wrong. So I delete it and I say, let's say tag underline, and I say it wrong. So I start again, and I do it 3 or 4 times. So Recut will remove the silences between, but it'll keep the 4 underline. And so the next step of the progression is some tool that can detect the waveform and say, Dude, it is so close. I can guarantee that you were saying the same thing and you just messed up. So I'm going to keep the last one of these that look the same. I imagine that's how it works. Like, actually, I don't think it's how it works. I think it does a transcript and then reads the transcript. And then if the word is the same, it kind of cans it. So this goes to my next discovery. Fast forward, imagine I've done 20 or 30 videos like this and I spent probably a good 10 hours of editing just this chop, rapid process, which is my first pass. I call it my first of 3 passes when I edit. And at this point, I'm like, man, this is so boring and time consuming and repetitive. And usually when these words come to your head, usually AI is supposed to help with that. Boring, repetitive, predictable, low IQ, high predictability. And I thought I'll just go, because I haven't really researched, I'll go on YouTube and search for like, is there any video editors that kind of talk about AI tools that helps their workflow? And I found this video. It's a channel that I used to not really like because it's a bit, not cheesy, but it's usually for like marketers or like trying a bit too overhype, over the top. They have this really broad audience channel and they teach about good lights and good cameras. I forgot the name of but I'm sure you've seen it. It's like one of the most popular channels. But they had this video called 5 AI tools that will transform your video editing process. And I was like, oh, what the hell? Let's look at it. And the tools I've discovered in there were like, holy cow, this is exactly what could save my bacon or like save me some time. And one of the tools presented was called Gling.ai, Gling, Gling.ai. And what Gling does is basically the part that Recut does, which is remove the silences. But it uses AI instead of Imagine Recut uses waveform detection. I have no idea, and that's why that'd be cool to have Dave on. But Gling, you upload a video and it's like AI doing its thing and it writes a transcript. You might have seen it in tools like Descript as well. It literally, you have the text version of what you said on the left and the video on the right. And then you can select any bit of text and hit delete and it's gonna cut the equivalent bit of the video that says that. You basically have word editing of your video audio, which is pretty trippy. But it doesn't stop there. What it does is it already pre-highlights all the things that you've said more than once. It doesn't cut it for you, but it say, hey, I imagine this is how you want to cut it. Almost like a Git diff, like sometimes you have this suggestion, you should probably accept this. Let me just verify with you. So basically it tries to do the best job possible at removing all the repeated sentences and the coughing, whatever sounds. Like it's amazing. Like I tried it and I thought the free tier has one video that you have access to full feature and then you can keep doing it, but it has watermarks and stuff. And I thought, I researched this after the most painful 16-minute video edit that took me 3 hours. And that's when I was like, okay, that was one of 71 videos. I cannot continue doing this. This is like for longer videos. And so that's when I did that research. I found this. And then I edited a few more videos that were pretty short. I was like, I don't want to use my one chance at full feature. And so I waited until I had another long one. And there was another long, like 10, 12 minutes, like looking, the raw footage was like 12 minutes long. And I was like, what the hell? This one I'm uploading to Gling for free. And I didn't touch anything. And it did the most like it literally did exactly the job I would have done. And that would have taken an hour, 45 minutes, whatever, to maybe 98% quality. But the magic doesn't stop here. The magic is you can export this to Resolve or Final Cut, or I think that's the main two because they support XML format. And so I exported this pre-cut thing in DaVinci Resolve with the full ability to undo stuff or change the clips or like add a little bit of padding on the right of a word because it cut too hard. So I didn't just had a raw file that taken the silences and stuff off. I had the literally pre-chopped with like 1,000 cuts. Exactly the thing I do manually. I had it done by AI in like 10, 15 seconds, plus the time to import. And that's when I was like, holy crap. And I went to Gling and I went subscribe and I paid for the monthly subscription. There's a yearly subscription that's cheaper, but I was like, I'm going to use it right now for the next few days. it's already saved me enough, like that I can pay $19 or whatever. And from then, I basically sped up this first pass workflow like completely ridiculously tremendously. You still have to import and then export and then sync, and you have that weird thing where you can only upload one video on Glink. And I have my screen and camera, but I want the same chopping to happen to both. And I was like, oh, how do I do this? And then I found a way in Resolve to do this, but it's kind of hidden and weird. And I'm sure there's better ways. But Kling is also talking about the ability to upload multiple things and sync them, so to solve that problem.
Yeah, this is like, I've gone down such a rabbit hole with this stuff, like probably, I don't know, maybe like 3 months ago when I switched to DaVinci Resolve. Yeah. I started, because I have Descript as well. And so Descript, like you were saying, allows you to like edit a script. And it has this really great built-in functionality where you can just say, remove gaps. And like you were talking about with the first...
Recut.
Recut, yeah. Like you were talking about with Recut, where you can like set the parameters of like how much of silence either side do I want to keep. So you can kind of like fine tune it, delete all of the gaps, and then you can go through and manually script edit. And it also has the functionality where you can export it out and put it into DaVinci Resolve or Final Cut or something else. And so I thought that was fantastic, and I loved using that. But it just like, there were like a couple of things that it didn't, like sentences where just like it missed a whole chunk. Like there was a whole chunk where I was talking, but it just showed it as silence in the transcript. Yep. And also the like cutting either side just like wasn't very accurate when I made it like a small number, or even when I made it like a larger number. It like I had to go and like manually trim every single one to be like kind of the distance that I wanted it to be of silence. And so then DaVinci Resolve actually launched this as well. So you can do this in DaVinci Resolve Studio, so the paid version. You can do a transcription edit, so it will like go through and analyze everything, give you the full transcript, and does a similar thing where like you highlight over a section and you see the video on the right of what the section that you're editing. Yeah. And so you can edit through the script, and it edits through the video. And it also has this delete gaps thing. But that was way worse than Descript, because Descript obviously focuses on that one thing, whereas this is just like maybe a person or a small team within Blackmagic that make DaVinci Resolve that work on this, this one feature. So yeah, I just found that like I lost total confidence in those ones, because it kept just adding so much to my process, because I would need to like manually still trim everything. But then at the end I was like, but did we miss any bits? Like, there like, is there a chunk? Like, I'd have to watch through and like really focus on what I was saying to make sure that there wasn't just like a chunk of explanation missing. And so then when Gling like really got me excited, because you can, exactly what you were talking about, you chuck a file in there and it doesn't just delete everything. It gives you this like really nice color coordinated overview of what it's going to do if you click the button. And so you can go through and like quickly eyeball, or even just like quickly listen through all of the bits that it's going to delete, or any bits that you think there might be something in there that it's missed. And then if you're happy, commit. But I hit the exact problem that you're talking about now, where I needed to then sync up the talking head bits, so my camera bits, to the screen recording. And so I do my capture slightly differently to you, in that when I do a talking head, I just record that part on the camera, and then when I go back to the screen sharing bit, I go back to that full screen. And so I only have these little like,
you don't have the full timeline in the camera because it's too big a file.
So the two files aren't like running for the same duration, but they're just slightly out of time, so you can sync them up. I'm syncing like a collection of camera files to one really big like long master timeline bit. And so again, DaVinci Resolve has really good tools for syncing these, but the part that's missing is exactly what you're talking about, where you have like multiple sources, or what's called multicam footage, and you want to use a tool like Gling to automatically remove all of the silences, but of this big kind of synced master project or master timeline. And so, yeah, I'm really excited for Gling to fix that, to introduce that feature. Or the other option is like, put it all in DaVinci Resolve, sync everything up, export out an XML, which has all of that information in it, import that into
Yeah.
something like Gling, then do the Gling bits, and then export it out as XML again to put it back in DaVinci Resolve. So yes. That's my pain that I've experienced with this stuff. Like, it solves the problem so perfectly, but I feel like
It exposes
this small bit that's missing for me.
Well, Gling has exports to DaVinci Resolve, and then it has another export to DaVinci Resolve multicam for this exact purpose. But what I found, well, I tried it and I didn't really manage to set it up properly, but also I've explained to you how I do my multicam is I sync them and then go left, right. Multicam is trying to use the same timeline, and then you can switch from camera A to camera B whenever you want. So, but I don't want this. I actually want to remain separate, but be synchronized. So the multicam didn't really work with my workflow that's ingrained in my brain, so I kind of abandoned this, and I found another way. I forgot, it's completely unintuitive. I found this on the forum. You can deconnect to the time code something, and if the two files have the same time codes baked in, which it does when you record, like this metadata to the video file you never see, but it's like lots of information, like the lens, whatever. Like for like cameras have the same, and somehow you can duplicate that edited thing that Gling did, and then you drag it to a second row, and then you disconnect the time code and you relink with the other footage which has the same time code, and it's like, oh, I see what you mean. I'm gonna use the same cuts but on this other raw footage, and that kind of worked, but it takes a bunch of clicks and it feels really weird. So yeah, it's not just like a magic tool, but what I was gonna say is it did the best job of all the times I've used it. It did the best job on my one trial. It nailed that one, and I completely got over, this hype curve that where you get overexcited and then you're like, oh, and then you get down, and then it kind of balances out to the so it sent me over that like hype, because like, holy crap, this is I can skip this whole step, which is like 80% of the editing time. And then when I used it on the next video, it did exactly what you said. It skipped bits, or it cut every time a little bit too early. So I had to manually nudge every clip, which I realized for small clips is actually more work than doing it just manually myself. And so that's when I went down the curve, like, oh, maybe that's not the tool I thought it was. And then I came up to a self-arbitrary conclusion that if the raw footage is 7 minutes long or longer, I run it through Gling, and it's the pre-chopping kind of makes sense to save me time, even if I manually edit the rest. And if it's less than 5 minutes, I do it manually, because it's more work to do the visual word chopping verification and then export and synchronize and then still nudge things. And I was like, I've probably spent more time doing it, and I had lost the confidence that I didn't cut off like a key segment. And then like when I watched the video, like you said, I try to make sure the story makes sense. And if you do 70 videos, there's inevitably a time where you start dozing off while you watch the footage, and I got to rewind because I'm not sure what I just watched. So it did not transform my process from like, now Gling does abstract this, but I feel like as AI gets better, it is going to get there. My other problem with it is I use it for very long videos. So inevitably the text version of your script is very long too. So I would start at the top and look at the first 20, 30 lines. Yep. I couldn't help myself by saying, oh, can I just trust this thing? It looks pretty good. And like, I was like, otherwise, instead of editing in Resolve, I'm editing in a Word document, which I don't necessarily prefer. I don't have my ripple delete stuff keyboard. Like, now I'm back to clicking and dragging and selecting. And so I ended up just accepting what it did, knowing that it's lossless. The footage is still all there. You just have to manually adjust it. So I ended up opting to let it do its best job possible, and then do the nudging in Resolve, which is the fastest for me. So it's still, I'm still going to use that tool. It's really good, but just beware if you use it that it's not the magical, it will know exactly what your video is trying to do. There's also a thing in coding screencasts where you say a word and then you finish the code, or you want to leave you don't want to type the class name in Tailwind and instantly switch to the next clip, because you want people to have time to see it and maybe pause and copy and whatever. And because it edits audio, it's got no idea what it looks like on a screen. And so for coding screencast, you always have to add some 1-2 second delay. So I try to add the padding, but then it adds more space in wording. Like there is no magic recipe for a coding screencast that AI can chop perfectly, unless it analyzes the visual thing as well, which it doesn't yet. Sure. But it definitely sped up some of my process and eased some of the pains of the pass number 1. I know I talk a lot, but it's the most time-consuming editing part of the process and also the longest to explain.
Yeah, that's the exact part that I just want one-click thing. And I think you're right. Like it's so close to being like the point that we've come from to the point we're at now with these tools is just like incredible. Like that just like takes out so much of that work. And now it's just about like tuning that little bit. So making it like, detect these things more accurately, introducing things like, timelines that have multiple videos and being able to auto sync those before you start the process. All of those are like small tweaks to a really, really good foundational thing, like fundamental thing that's solving a huge problem.
Yeah.
I think like if you've ever created videos, especially like long videos or a series, if you've ever done a course, anyone who's done a course, you will understand this pain.
Yeah.
Like it takes so much time editing,
yeah.
Like definitely more time editing than any other part of the process. Like, like actually filming the recorded takes, or on the other side when you're like, doing promotion and stuff. The part that you spend the most like focused time is just editing these clips and just dragging a playhead around and slicing and then slicing other clips and moving things around. It's so time consuming. And I feel like if you can like use a tool like this to take care of that really boring, repetitive part that doesn't take skill, it doesn't take creativity, it doesn't take any of those things that you need to do as a content creator. It just does the robot task of just removing all of the silences or whatever. And then, like, something that I found was that because I had simplified that process, I then had more like creative energy to put into the polish. And so I wasn't already like exhausted from going through this process of cutting each clip so accurately. Because I just like outsourced that, I could spend a lot more time on, nice overlays or illustrations or like animations and things, just really like upping the quality level of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This is the main reason why a lot of creators end up hiring editors, because it takes so much time. I have a very specific way of editing. I'm pretty peculiar of how my video, the pace and the vibe. I think it's a lot of my identity is like how videos are edited versus just like editing videos. And so the idea of like having someone else edit, even for the Epic Web workshop that I did, the team, Joe Hook's team behind Epic Web and Pro Tailwind and Matt Pocock's Total TypeScript, they offer editing services. So you record the raw stuff and put it in Dropbox, which is the first step I did, and then they take care of that. But I was like, I want to do, I am self-inflicting myself thousands of hours of editing, because for me, like the products and the quality polish is it's not that I think they're not good editors, but they will edit differently. They will literally just cut off the silences and have the raw thing.
And it's just so personal. Like you have designed this,
yes.
Like if you've written a script or whatever, the way that you've designed this example, like all of it is exactly how you want to present it. So you've like, even subconsciously, you've got an idea as to how this is going to look when it's edited. And that doesn't mean just like, literally cutting the clips together. There's this kind of flow of the way that you have a conversation, the way that you deliver things.
And I'm putting a comment on the screen. Daniel mentions that the video vibe is like something that made it really special. And I get this all the time. And to me, it's very important to maintain this. Like in any course that I create, I'm like, I want this to be the feel that people like. There's a way you make people connect with you through humor and pace and timing and music and all that stuff. And so you nailed it when you said the first pass, which I've described, is boring and repetitive, but it's what sets you up for the creative and outlet where you can actually, if you still have mental energy, do something really cool. And that's why I always thought maybe I can outsource to someone to do the pre-cut. But again, I want to make sure I'm going to have to go through it again to like, I don't think I could ever like get someone to do the pre-chopping, because there's still, maybe sometimes I said something twice, but intentionally because of some humor or whatever to drive the point home. So I feel like AI is perfect because it's cheaper than having an editor that just does like 4 hours of pre-cutting and gives it back to you. And there's like asynchronous stuff where you can do it like on the fly. But yeah, it doesn't solve completely the problem, but it makes it better. If every video started there, that would be ideal, because I'm going to go faster through it, but then I have 2 more passes in my editing process, and we can compare with yours if you're happy with that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, something skirting around is that I have actually got an editor now. So my wife has started editing my videos, and it's kind of the perfect balance in what we're talking about, because she wasn't an experienced video editor before that. And so it's not like she has this idea of how these videos should be edited and applying her experience to this thing. Basically, I was like, I need someone that just repeats this process, like that goes through and understands my content, my delivery, and like, you know, is getting it to this point where all of the silences have been edited out, all of the like repeated takes have been edited out. And then if there's any like additional polishy stuff, like I have the time and energy to work on that. And it's just been awesome. Also, the fact that we live in the same household, so it's like
the feedback loop.
It's really easy to to like hand over a project, and like, you know, we can trade off like there's, you know, like last launch week with Superbase is just like an incredibly busy time where we're launching a new feature and a new video every single day. And so being able to like hand over the footage to her and then being like, all right, cool, I'll put the kids to bed, you start the editing, like one of us could kind of like trade off this process of getting all of these videos done, which was just like, such amazing time. It was awesome.
Yeah, there's a lot of tricky parts about this first step. I remember feeling guilty for absolutely no reason, because it's such a deep focus, repetitive stuff that typically I would go through multiple hours without taking a break, without checking Twitter, without checking Slack or anything. And I remember sometimes, like when I was at Tailwind Labs, I would have like this 40-minute long footage, and I would spend an entire day just chopping it up really nicely. And I was like, every now and then I'd be like, it's been 4 hours since I haven't checked Discord. Maybe someone wanted to talk to me, or didn't listen to the community, or like I felt super guilty, like I'm not doing any work, where I was actually in crazy deep focus for the primary role that I'm doing, which is producing videos. And there's that weird perception of like not making real progress, and therefore you're wasting time. So anything that can simplify this is good. But once you've done that pre-cut, which is that's when I get excited about video editing, because like Jon said, now the creative process happens. And I'm gonna give you I've tried different techniques, and what works best for me is to go in this order. And this is why on step 1 I have the video left, and then the camera left, and the screen on the right. My second pass is actually really quick. Typically the intro segment, I'm gonna be full screen with the camera, so I put this on. Remember, all my clips are at 66% with like a specific offset. But in Resolve, you can quickly click on a clip, and there's that reset everything to factory, which is full screen. And so I have my camera layer below the screen. So the screen is masking most of the camera, but I have my little thing on the left. And then if I want to put the screen on top, I just set the screen to full, and it just goes over. And if I want to set the camera on top, I have to either delete the screen and put the camera full screen, or I can change the opacity of the screen if I change my mind. But basically, what I do is I leave things side by side while I'm looking at the camera. And the first clip where I'm starting to look at my keyboard and we go in code, I highlight with my mouse that clip of the screen recording, and then I go really fast forward. So in most editing software, and actually even YouTube and stuff, there's JKL keys, which is like the playhead speed. If you go L, it doubles the speed every time you press. So you can go 2 times, 4 times, 8 times, 16 times. And you can slow it down with J, and K stops it. So I literally go LLLL, so it's like 8 times, it's really, really fast. And I deep focus on my face, and I'm like the whole time looking at the screen. And then I look at the camera and I start talking. So I pause here. And because I had highlighted the first clip where I started talking without looking at the camera, I go shift, click on the last one, and I make all this clip full screen. So that means all that segment now have the screen recording full screen, and I'm not showing my face at all. That's intentional. I think it takes I don't really love when the speaker is always on the corner, because I end up looking at them and like forgetting what I'm supposed to listen to. And so I go through the whole thing like this, and then I go to the next clip where I look away from the camera, highlight really fast until the next segment. And so at the end of this step, that takes anything between 1 and 4 or 5 minutes. It's usually really quick because I can just blitz through. This is where the video goes from like pretty boring to already like, wow, it's taking shape. So at the end of this process, I have a mix of screen recording and then some intervention where I speak to the camera on the side and then go back to full screen. And then I just look, if there's one moment where I speak for a really long time on camera, maybe the middle one, I go full screen, so it adds a bit of dynamic energy. And when I've done that, I have like a kind of roughly chopped video. Sometimes some of the cuts are too quick or too short and I have to nudge it a bit. But I already have a really entertaining video that has like camera changes, and I'm like, oh, this thing is taking shape. So that's my second pass. Most people would ship second pass and have already pretty good video. Do you do something similar to do you multicam decisions, art direction?
So I think very similarly, the process in how I record my camera kind of has that same effect. So when I'm scrubbing through the footage, I can very quickly see where I'm switching from a screen sharing thing to a talking head. And so, a similar thing, like the reason that I do it that way, jumping between those two, like fully focused, there's 2 reasons. The first one is like you said, when you're just like looking down at a keyboard typing or like looking down at a screen, like, do people really need to see you while you're doing that? Or do you need to be as like bigger focus? Like either going down into the corner and being small or not being there. And so by removing me entirely, like I feel like this was when I was doing egghead videos, I started thinking about it this way, that it's like just remove
distractions,
anything that's distracting off the screen. So you're removing absolutely everything.
The sidebar icons, all the
Yeah, exactly. You're removing everything in the UI. You're making everything full screen. You just take away any distraction that you can. And so I kind of adopted that attitude about me being on the screen as well. And I constantly go back and forth with this because it's like it does make it more personable having someone there, even if you're like looking down, like what you said before, you always get distracted by looking at the person, even though they're not looking at the camera and they're just sitting there typing. That's still because, like, you know, naturally you're drawn to human beings. You're drawn to, like, you want to look at a person rather than looking at just some code on the screen. So I always go back and forth with this about whether I want to have me always there, just as like a smaller thing in the corner or, you know, less priority in some way, or whether I want to remove it entirely. But just because of the process of how I record at the moment, it makes it easier to just remove it entirely. So that's the first reason that I tend to jump between those two. The second reason is that it makes editing bits where I messed something up so easy. And not just in the same recording session, but I often, especially with the like really technical examples, sometimes I'm showing something, you know, with Supabase and database stuff. There's lots of moving parts between like Next.js and all of this automated stuff that's going on the back end. And sometimes I'll be like delivering like, all right, cool. So then we click this button and then this thing happens. And then the thing doesn't happen. And then I'm like, no, I forgot to set something up. And I realized that there was just like one tiny little bit, like I forgot to enable something in one of the parts. Because I'm now not on the screen during the time where I'm going through the example, makes it really easy to recreate the screen that I was on. So go to that menu where I forgot to click that button. And then I can really easily just record a segment to drop in there where I click the thing. And then I'm able to then, again, just go back to where I was and record the section where it was successful.
And then it's seamless, And it's like a little curtain.
And sometimes...
Curtain you close that the people can't see you, and you do a magic trick and then you reappear,
Exactly, yeah, because if I'm on the screen, like, I've got to also make sure I'm wearing the same thing. Like,
Yeah.
it might be 2 days later that I'm doing an edit or whatever, and realize there's some little bit that I need to add in there. And so making sure I'm wearing the same stuff, that I have my hair cut in the same way or shaved similarly. Like, there's too many variables that I need to match up if I'm also on the screen. And sometimes, like, that stuff will happen. Like, I'll go to put it out and then, oh, we've changed the way this feature works, or we've changed the way that we set it up. This happens especially when, like, I'm covering some brand new thing that we're launching in Supabase. You know, something might change about the UI, or something might, like, oh, we realized, you know, this may be a security vulnerability, so we need to change the way that you enable it like this. So then I need to add something to the video, but it's days and days later and just before I'm going to go live with it. So rather than having to re-record the whole video or have this really awkward section where it like jumps between two bits where it's really obvious that like something changed there. I find it's really easy when I just have the screen showing for the bits where we're focusing on the screen and then me showing for the bits that are focused on me. It's really easy to find those edit points and seamlessly add in a section.
Yeah. And by doing this, you keep yourself free of, like, if you always have your face in the corner, you kind of like committed to this is my vibe. There's always the camera, and so you can't, like, if it disappears, people are like, oh, did the camera feed that? Like, it's almost your brand. So by mixing and matching, you allow yourself that. Sometimes I switch from side to side to full camera and back side to side, just because between one cut I was finishing the word like this, and the next sentence I'm like this, because I moved my arms and it's impossible to do a nice cut. So going full screen completely hides that thing. And same with the code. Like, if you scrolled a little bit and you didn't come back to the same point, by just adding yourself on the side and then going away again, you completely, people look at you and then they just get like that's magic. Like, deviate the attention somewhere so you can do something else somewhere else.
Yeah, I do that a lot. Like, sometimes I'll realize that I've moved the mouse, or like I've opened another file like off camera while I was editing stuff in VS Code or whatever. And then I go to edit it and I'm like, oh, these two don't actually line up. There's this big jump where it's really obvious that the UI has changed. I'll just record a quick, like, so what we did, like just like a quick talking head where I'm like explaining, like just clarifying a little part about what we just did or whatever. And then, like you're saying, it's like this sleight of hand magic trick where it's like, look over here. Now we're talking about this thing. And then when you switch back, it's like you've lost that perception of where was the mouse and what was on the screen. What did the UI look like? Because you've changed to this full screen distracting magician.
Dangling something.
Really
forget what you just saw.
Another, like, you know, real life thing that tends to happen is like there'll be like I'll need to go and pick up the kids from school at a particular time, or I need to finish up and go make dinner. And so I realize that, like, you know, I might be only 60% of the way through the video, and I've got, like, I'm not going to get through the rest of the video in the time that I have. So then I might just record the talking heads, like the bits that need to look consistent, where I need to look well groomed and well dressed in my Supabase cap. And then I can kind of like front load all of that stuff and just record all of the talking heads that I know that I'm going to need to do. And then the next day when I come to recording, it's not as different an environment. Like, I need to try and make sure that the mic level
there's
is
lots.
the same.
The light,
the energy levels are the same, but there's not that visual aspect as well. Then I can just go through, like just recording the screen sharing bits without needing to make sure that everything else is like perfectly matched.
Absolutely. That's why I mentioned in my like 71 video recording, I tried to record as many in one block, so there's a bit more consistency. That was a week-long process, and I ended up like, I had that question, like, what does it matter if I change from black to green t-shirt and stuff, like? And I thought the rule is like there's 8 different segments in the workshop, which they have a break in between in real time when you develop. So I was like, I have to do within one segment. I try to record everything in the same section so it feels consistent. And then if you, after the break, even if the person watches it 2 seconds later, I've changed it. It's like, hey, it's a new day, new me, new something. And I ended up making sure I recorded till the end of a segment when I could. I have one more note on the showing your face versus not. I do realize that sometimes it brings humanity. So when I go through my whole process, I I don't only put the segment where I talk to the camera. I look for anything interesting, and like if I make a little joke while I code and I smile and I have like a interesting little body movement, I'm like, oh, I'll just bring that in. So it brings this, like, you can't help when you watch it, you can't help like, oh, holy crap, he's really doing everything on camera. Like it's got that, the sound doesn't change. Like I just remind people, hey, I'm a human. It's not just like a AI voice talking through the... So I try to bring anything interesting that spikes my interest. I add it on the feed like this. But I think it removes everything that's not on camera is basically me looking in the same direction and typing, and there's nothing that should draw your attention away from the code in these parts. Yeah, I think
that's something that is always missing, that I'm always like, yeah, I wish I could just drop in for those like exciting moments where you like do something and like you're saying, you react in a certain way, or you laugh at your own joke or something. Yeah, I always have to, like, when that happens, I have to weigh up, like, do I want to turn the camera on and record like a staged version of that reaction? Or do I want to just leave the audio version, or do I want to cut it out entirely?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's definitely one of the...
So yes, by having all of it, you can like bring these moments, because like you hear when I talk to you, like every now and then I go woohoo, or make little sounds like, and sometimes like, oh, bringing the camera just for these little bits adds like a lot of dynamic energy. But otherwise, and the last thing on camera, I think it has value when you live stream to have the camera always on, because someone joins randomly and they see, oh, there's this guy live coding, instead of just... But for edited videos, I think having it all the time is probably more harm than benefits. So that's my second pass. Once I've done this, I can watch the video, and it's like I would ship that and not feel like, yeah, maybe there's a word that cuts just a bit too short, or maybe the code is not shown long enough. But my third pass is essentially what I call the Simon Swiss polish layer. Like that's when I take a good video to a great video. And what I do is I don't go, because videos are long, I don't go at normal speed, but I've trained myself. I listen to all my podcasts at 2x speed. I watch some videos at 2. So I press LL, so it goes 1, 2. And so it's everything at double speed, but you still hear every word. And so I watch the video entirely at 2x speed, and I really focus on the delivery and how natural it feels if I discovered it for the first time. And every time it feels a bit rough, I pause it, and then I just go tweak that cut, and then I continue doing the process. And I usually do that full screen as well. I go Command F, so it's full screen, and I watch it at 2x, and every time it feels a bit abrupt, I go add a bit of tuning. Pro tip, you can use the comma and period keys to nudge left or right if you select a clip, to add like a frame by frame, instead of trying to drag while squinting to draw 3 frames. You go ... pushes it by 3. And
another quick hint on the you said you did Command F to full screen it while you're watching it. Another thing that I discovered recently is you can have what's called a clean video feed. So if you have multiple monitors, you can put basically a clean full screen version of what you're editing on one of those screens. And so when I'm editing on one of my screens, I have it full screen on the other. So if I do a similar thing where I like watch through at 2 times speed to see if anything feels unnatural, and while I'm doing that, I can be looking at the left screen full screen, and then as soon as I notice one of those things, rather than needing to like exit out, I just move over to the other screen and like quickly make a cut and then rewatch it on the other one. It's just like a fast way of having that clean video version going the whole time.
That's a great point. So I have my laptop, which is 1350, I don't know, it's like too small to edit DaVinci Resolve, because Resolve has a lot of UI bits. And then I have a 32-inch really big monitor. It's not 4K, but I went for size instead of resolution, because I want to have the biggest space for the editing. And so I go Command F full screen, and then Escape pops you out of it. And I find it's almost faster, because my hand is already resting on these keys. It's almost faster to hit Escape than turn my head to the other monitor. And so I do it in one, but I like the idea that you can see both and then do the edit. So when I finish that, most of the time it's like third, I've done the layer of polish, and at this point it's a freaking solid video, and I can export. And for the 71 I did, that's where I stopped. Sometimes I had a 4th layer, which is just the music. So I have a subscription for Envato Elements. Envato is like this big marketplace. They're based in Melbourne, like the headquarters, Australian company, and they have like templates, WordPress themes, and photos, stock photo. And one of them is like the music. It's called Audio Jungle. But then they have Envato Elements, which is like a subscription model where instead of buying individual stock assets, you have access to freaking millions of stuff. They have resolved transitions. There are lots of interesting stuff beyond just audio. But for me, just the audio by itself, as it's like 90% of what I use is the audio. The library is like the quality of acceptance. If you want to upload stuff there is very, very high. So everything feels very professional. And so I literally, that's my vibe, but I look for like a lo-fi jazz, hip hop, boom bap sort of vibe. And I type these search terms in the music genre. And then instead of sorting by popular, because I hate someone say, oh yeah, that's that song you hear on every video. So I sort by new always. So the results are a bit less relevant, but they're always like brand new stuff. And I listen to anything from 1 to maybe sometimes close to 100 first 5 seconds of the video. And what I do at this point is I have in mind how my intro is. If my intro is like 15 seconds long, usually I say, today we're going to this, blah, blah, blah. And then you do it as well. I say, all right, let's jump right into it, or let's go, let's start. I know you even have a soundboard stuff in your Discord with that stuff.
Yeah, I've got two catchphrases.
Let's get
the
right
section
into
where
it.
I go, I say let's get into it is the catchphrase going from like the intro into like the code full screen thing, and then at the end of the video I say keep building cool stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Is the other when I just a quick side note, when I went to, we had like a super bass, like we all got together in Thailand recently, and yeah, just like the whole team just kept reminding me of my catchphrases. At the end of each day, like,
keep
doing,
building
like,
cool
presentations
stuff
and stuff. At the start of each day, the CTO got me to say let's get into it just before the first presentation started, and then at the end,
the outro,
I would say keep building cool stuff. And so there was lots of jokes about my two catchphrases.
It's great. It's one of these little trick to get people to like it makes it familiar and friendly, and then you're like, oh, I know this person. I knew they were gonna say this. It just build that connection. But yeah, so I look.
It's also a getting started hack for me because I have a script already prepared in Notion. So like I click a button and it starts a script for me, and the first bit is like, I'm gonna show you how to X. And so like I've already got that like leading sentence where it's like, oh, okay, well I just need to describe what the thing is. And so I just start typing. I don't need to think like, how am I going to start this? How am I going to make it
the
fun?
opener.
Having those recurring things
Totally.
just kind of like allows me to just, hit the ground running and start.
Yeah, it's like a framework boilerplate, like you have your starter template. And I had the exact same at Tailwind Labs. I never knew how to finish a video. I was like, all right, that's it. Thanks for joining. And then I was like, I always say, I'll see you in the next one. And I'll put my hand on the camera and it goes blur, and then I just fade out. And I was like, this is the perfect way to end, because it's not awkward, and it's like kind of like a signature at this point. I'll assume you can still hear me. You're frozen, but yeah. And so I went from like awkward, I don't know how to, like leaving a Zoom call, you're like, do I wave? Do I just hit eject? To like this kind of punchy, energetic outro. And yeah, so that's the same sort of trick. But for the intro, I look how long my intro is, because I've done the pass already. And then in the when you choose for an audio file, you can see, like we were talking about the waveform, you can see the song that have an intro because it starts small and it builds up, and then there's the drop, like let the beat drop. And then I'm like, oh, this is about 10 seconds and I have a 8 to 10 second intro. So my intuition tells me that it's going to be a banger drop where I go like, in this video, we're going to talk about this and how it improved this. Let's do it. And then bang, I can slap the camera and the beat drops and the transition comes. And that intro with the punchy music and a fancy little transition is like 90% of like people going, oh my God, Simon's videos are incredible, because I start and there's high energy and there's the music that comes right on beat. It's not just like background music. It's like sort of calculated so it flows with my intro, and then boom. I don't do this for my 71 videos in Epic Web because it's a workshop and people are like learning on the sequence stuff. So I'm not trying to hype them up to a new feature with every video. But if you look at any video I do for Tailwind Labs or for my own stuff where it's a longer content, I typically do this fourth pass where I choose a song and I line up the intro with it. If I have time and energy, I do the little chapters where the music comes back and there's multiple segments. I've done one this week, actually, a couple of days ago, where I go through, there's a entrepreneur called Marc Louvion, and he wrote a blog post with 7 tips to make punchy headlines, like style tips. And I was like, this is really cool, and this would make cool content. So I did, hey, let's go through this blog post and build these 7 tips with Tailwind. And so I have a little chapter for each. It takes 3-4 minutes to prepare the transition, and then I just drag and drop and change the text every time. So I have the text and the background color and the music, and they all link together, and then I drag the 3 segments for each chapter. And I usually bring back the same music at the end for the outro, and I try to find a beat that kind of lines up with my outro. Once again, usually the end of the song, or if it doesn't work, I kind of fade out in the way I spend a bit of time making it sure that it sounds good, because the last thing you want is the last segment of video music stuff kind of like leave a bad note to something that's super polished. So if you're lucky, I do the 4th path for you. For my workshop, I'll do this for the intro video and the outro. And then the others only have the 3 passes, which is like chop, and then select art direct when I'm on camera, when I'm off. And then the 3rd one is the final review and tweaking of the transition so it feels really polished. That's my process in a nutshell.
I love your musically timed intros. Like you're saying, it just like it sets that energy level so high, and it's just awesome. It's definitely something that like stood out immediately, way before we knew each other. When I was watching your Tailwind content, amazing work.
Yeah, and I did not know at the time, but there's that whole science that YouTube is all about retention for the first 5-10 seconds. And it's like you gotta really like grab them and show that you're about to deliver cool stuff. And I was like, I did not mean it, but I kind of approached it that way, that I just want to start on the strong point, and I kind of did this. And I do think that it kind of helped with the people watching and then being, Tailwind is actually really cool. I should try it, like the adoption of the framework.
Yeah, there's this really like critical first 30 seconds of a video, which kind of determines how well it's going to do on YouTube. And so, trying to grab people's attention and show them that like the thing that you're covering is really cool and they should stick around. Most people, like the watching habits, are like, in the first 30 seconds, they'll decide whether they're going to watch it or not. And so if you look at like retention graphs in YouTube analytics, so you can see like where did people drop off, there's usually this like steep ramp right at the start going down, like the reverse hockey stick, which is like, people deciding like they saw the title and thumbnail, that was enough, intrigued them enough to click on it, and they started watching, and then they were like, I don't care about this topic. And so there's like a huge number of people drop off in the first 30 seconds, but then you see that the graph really like levels out usually. And because once people have invested past that 30 seconds and they've decided to stick around, usually they're going to stick around for most of the video. And then you usually see another steep drop off right at the end of like when you start wrapping up a video, people are like, oh yeah, this is done, I'm out of here. And so there's this really critical 30 seconds at the start of a video that you want to be as engaging as possible and really like set up what they're going to learn, like what you're actually covering in the video, and maybe like build a little intrigue about something special that they might learn if they stick around to the end of the video. All these little tricks,
little hooks.
Like that musical thing, having musically like timed actions to music, and doing things like cutting to like an intro splash screen on like a big part of the music is a really effective way of doing that, because people are like, damn, this is high quality stuff. Like, I wonder if the rest of the video is going to be up to this level. And
it's not. It's just hooked you in now.
The excitement probably like drops down a little bit as the video goes. That first 30 seconds is that really important part to get someone invested in watching it.
Yes.
And once they're there, like they're actually learning the thing, and they stick around for longer to learn the thing that they're interested about. And so I'm very intentional in the way that I do super bass intros or intros to my videos, in that like the first 30 seconds or usually the first minute, there's a lot more switching back and forth between the like full screen code and the talking heads, because like my background is very colorful, it's all very bright, and my screen is all in dark mode and very like, different shades of dark grays. And so I'm always really worried that switching to the full screen code example really early in the video, people are just going to see gray and boring, and the energy drops off a little bit, the color drops off, and then they're like, yeah, no, I don't want to watch this for another 10 minutes or whatever. And so I really intentionally switch out to like talking heads to clarify things a lot early on in the video. And then again, that kind of like tapers off towards, like, as the video goes on, I get into more of like the technical complex stuff of the video. Yeah. And so that's another reason for that, is to try and get people excited in the first 30 seconds. Yeah. People have very primitive monkey brains that are like colors and excitement and happy faces. I want to keep watching. And so you want to engage that monkey brain as much as possible, but still give them the value. Like, the difference is that, like, both Simon and I actually create high quality, like, content that is actually valuable to people. Like, we're not just like, let's do lots of really fast transitions to engage those monkey brains and then like sell them something, or like give them, you know,
bait and switch.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, that's the thing that makes me feel okay about using these techniques to
because the value is there.
I'm trying to get them engaged so that they actually get something out of it.
That's how you ideally would do it. You would deliver the value first, and then, okay, now I need to convince them their value so they get to see it, instead of spending all your energy in the hype and then there's nothing to follow. If you've never edited videos, you'll realize the exact same is true for building websites. I assume most people listening to this are building websites. There's the hero section above the fold, and there's so much science that if you nail this part, then people let me keep scrolling, I'm interested. And if the site doesn't load fast, or the hero section doesn't really communicate quickly what you're doing, they'll bounce there's the drop-off rate within the first seconds is also really big, to the point where there's tools like Hotjar that's it's a script that observes where the mouse goes, and what if they could track the eyes, they would, but people tend to track and the mouse goes where they're looking. So it gives you this hot heat map of like where, the mouse went to the top right to the subscribe button, then it went left to the headline, and then they're gone. So maybe we need to change the headline or something. And if you convince them, they scroll. Same with an email. If your first sentence is a 10-line paragraph that boring as hell, people are gone. If it's super catchy and short, and like, you might win them over, and then you can tell them what you meant to tell them at the start. So it's just a whole capturing the interest of people, so they invest more time, because you deserve that time, because you get their attention.
Yeah, same with like blog posts and everything else.
Yeah, music,
Google
everything
is tracking all of that usage data. Like,
even it's
like, if
everything.
someone clicks on it, and then how long do they actually spend on that page? Do they just look at the title and then click back and go somewhere else? Do they scroll down and actually start reading it? How far through that do they get? All of that are usually very important signals to whatever those search engine things are, the algorithms that serve up those different resources.
Monkey brains.
How long people spend on that is a huge metric, because the whole point of Google search and the whole point of YouTube is to keep people on the platform and engaged as long as possible. And so if you can, videos are keeping people engaged, and they watch another video when they're finished, and then another video of your content, that's a huge flag to YouTube that this is keeping people on the platform, people are interested in it, and we should push it to more people.
To the absolute extreme of that, you have someone like Mr. Beast, who literally spends all the money and energy and time analyzing what is the most perfect video in terms of like retention, and looking at all the graphs and stuff. And that, if you look at a Mr. Beast video, the first 3 seconds are like, you're gonna win this boat, but maybe it's going to explode, and there's just all the shit happening for like 7 seconds. And it's like, literally, the video is about this. Like, it's someone who's going to try to win this boat, but they're going to he's going to win it, but then they're going to try to blast it with missiles, and like, and it's all within 3 seconds. And then Mr. Beast goes like, he's like, if you hover on a YouTube thumbnail, now it plays the first 3-4 seconds. So not only you need a good thumbnail, but then the start intro section should be aligned with that, because if you have a thumbnail about a basketball court, and then the first video is a boat with missiles, you're like, which one is it? So like, there's that whole crazy, and you said 30 seconds, but I think Mr. Beast is more like 3 seconds. It's literally, the drop off starts instantly. The more TikTok generation. Like TikTok is like 0.8 seconds, I think. We were talking about the padding in wording. Most of us, like whatever boomers or I don't even know what generation we are. But when we make videos, there's a fade in and 1 second silence and then, hello, let me talk about this. And if you look at the new generation, Gen Z, I think, when the TikTok starts, the first word is half cut. It appears like, today we're gonna do it. And it's like, because if you left the fade in and 1 second pause, I'm out. You haven't started, you've wasted 1 second of my next. Yeah. And so it's funny how the retention gets shorter and shorter as people have remote control to change channels. There's more channels, there's more content, educational materials. And so, yeah, I think it's very, but I never did it intentionally with my intros, but it happened to kind of make it work quite well.
Daniel in the chat is referring to that as the boomer pause, which...
But I have absolutely heard it like this. There's like the exactly like there's that podcast called My First Million, which it's so good. The name doesn't really reflect how good it is. It's just a business and great ideas podcast. And Sean, one of the hosts, kept saying like I have to combat this obsession to leave a silence before I start because people just bail out and they will literally leave comments like boomer pose. What Daniel said, he might have heard it on the podcast that like people say stop wasting 1 second, just go straight into it. Yeah, it's fun. But that's all the editing part that comes in the last pass. To do any of that, you need to first do the chopping and the art direction. And then initially I was trying to do everything at once. I was editing the video. I was like, oh, maybe I should be on camera here. And I was progressing really slow while chopping the bits. And then I realized if I do passes, it lets me like focus what is the task right now. It's like the assembly line. You first do a coat of like drywall and then you mud and tape and then you sand and then you paint, and instead of trying to do one wall at a time.
Yeah, I used to do the same thing of like trying to just edit like chronologically and just start
make it perfect
and start doing like a fine edit right from the first frame, and it just doesn't work when you are editing such a huge amount of content. I think that's a real benefit to that, like the way that I've been doing it, just manually chopping out the silences and being able to just kind of like, disengage a little bit while I'm doing that. It's not this like really focused process where I'm really engaged in what I'm doing. That has allowed me to like keep the energy level really high for those other parts of the process. Like I'm not feeling as fatigued and exhausted by trying to kind of get the fine edit done all at once. I can kind of do this like repetitive factory work at the start and then have that really creative bit that I can add the polish later. Is there anything else you want to cover, Simon? We've been doing this for a long time. We always go for so long. We have an hour of a conversation before we start. We have half an hour of conversation while we're live, and then we record the episode and go for another hour and a half. So
be really quick because this is value here, very value on the discussion.
You've stuck around to the end. Here's the big nugget, the reward that you get.
Mistakes I've learned in the process of doing this: choosing the music before editing the video. After recording, I would start the editing process. I'm gonna need music, so let's start with the music. What sort of vibe is this? I'm talking about this topic, so I should choose this music. And I would like have no way to figure out the intro length and this stuff I talked about before. So I would just pick a music arbitrarily, and then when I edit the video, it was really hard, and so the music doesn't work. I need to find another one. So music and all polish comes at the end, no matter what. Now, even if I'm tempted, I have some sort of vibe in my mood. I'm like, I forget that comes later. That's the first thing I wanted to say. So leave the polish for the end. The more assembly line and predictable you do it, the better compartmentalize you can do, and the better AI will be able to take over because it's predictable. And the other thing I wanted to say,
just quickly on that before you move on to the second point, what that also gives you, I heard this described by another video editor on YouTube, that basically if you do it in those like different versions of cuts, if you're working as like a professional editor or working as a professional content creator or a professional educational video recorder, you always have something that you can release at all of those points. So if a deadline is approaching quickly, you might realize like, oh, okay, I can sacrifice a little bit of the polish, or I can sacrifice a little bit of this. But if you're going through sequentially or chronologically editing and you're doing that fine polish from the start to the end, if that deadline's approaching and you're only 60% of the way through, you've only got 60% of a video. So like you can't bail out at that point. You have to keep going for the last 40%. Whereas if you've done a rough cut and then you've gone through and you've done like a fine cut, then and then you're going through and doing the polish, you may have already polished the first 60% of the video or the first 40% of the video. And that might be that most important part where you have that first 30 seconds where you're trying to engage someone. But you have a releasable product at any of those points, basically after maybe after like the second version of going through all of that, you have something that you can release if you have to release it.
Yeah.
And if you have the time, you can keep working on polishing it. So it's a really good, like, professional tip as well to go through it in that process.
Yeah, or make a clip like a subset of the video. I saw Matt Pocock do that yesterday. He's doing a video on how to publish something on NPM, and he said, here's the first 3 minutes video coming soon. So I guess he's halfway through editing and he's like, oh, that's a clip. So that was going to be my other tip. Sometimes you edit and there's a little blooper or something funny or interesting. And I always, that would be such a little thing to clip. Resolve has the letters I and O. The I is like the start of it's like a subset of the timeline. Like you just press I to start and then press O to finish, and then you can export just that bit. So I've started exporting it straight away and tweeting it right away. Say, hey, I'm working on this. Here's a cool segment. And you create that hype, marketing, excitement that you wanted to do. You do it straight up, and people it gives you that little flow of adrenaline instead of like thinking, I should do this, and then you have to go back and scrub the video to find the moment. So even if you don't publish it, just have a fun bits folder where you export little segments, little clips. I found like a really cool trick. I'm really pissed off that I forgot, because Daniel said something which is what I was saying before. In my head, I was like, when you buy a domain name before building an app, you're like, choosing the music before is the same. You're like, this is going to be great. It's going to have this vibe. You choose the name, and then you're like, how do I build this to make it a business?
I disagree. That is definitely the right way to do it.
We do
Buy the domain name first, have a catchy name, and then you can work backwards and work out what you're actually going to build.
I still have one more thing to say. It's very important. This has bled into how I build websites. With Tailwind specifically, Tailwind is amazing at rapidly prototyping something that looks good enough. And you've seen that process through the Navbar website. I'm going to build a rough, which is the equivalent of the rough cut. There's the layout, 3 columns, not responsive, who cares, whatever. But it's like a first pass. And then I could ship this and say, hey, it's a work in progress. Don't shame the code. It's not finished, but it's viable already, instead of just having the navbar perfectly built. And then I go do a second pass where I tweak the padding and the colors and the font. And I go through multiple passes, almost like a JPEG rendering, or I don't know which one, start with pixels and then it gets better. This is something that Adam and I clashed a lot on when I was at Tailwind Labs, because he would review some code and say, hey, dude, the padding is completely wrong. And I was like, oh, yeah, I'm just doing a rough pass and then going through. And Adam is, if you watch the streams he's done recently, he's completely different on that. Is like every bit you start, you just completely pixel perfect finish, and then you move, and then you know kind of anything that's on the screen is done. Where with Tailwind UI components, I would do a rough pass, knowing the next pass I'll fine tune. And both have their value, but I work much better in like sequences, rough cut, and then polish, iteration. So I find funny that my video editing and Tailwind programming process is the very same. I do the rough cut, then I do a second pass, and then if you're lucky, I go through the Simon Swiss polish of the third thing, where you add animations, and then you end up with like the really solid stuff.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, with building websites professionally, you can always have something that's ready to release. It's also like even more applicable in the web development space, because you can still be adding those layers of polish after it goes live. Like you can put it live because you need to hit that deadline, and then you can be like, oh, here's a little thing that I could tweak, or like here's a little really convenient feature that I could add on top. Yeah. It would be nice if you could do that with videos. It would be nice if YouTube allowed you to keep
version control. Oh my God. Git for video, where you can do a pull request to fix the thing you said wrong.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. Video editing is so set in stone, hard-coded, that you end up sometimes re-recording the whole video when the framework updates something. You can't just, let me PR update the dependency and change the code.
Even rendering the video is a destructive process. Like it's removing a bunch of quality and like baking in. You're really setting the concrete on your video. And if you want to change something about the video, like you've essentially got to create a different version of that video. And YouTube works the same way. Once you upload something, that's immutable. You can't, like, one video is linked to one YouTube video ID that's one URL. And so if you want to change something about that video, you need to upload another version of the video and try and direct the audience from one to the other, which is what I have been doing a lot of recently, and it's not fun.
Yeah, even YouTube, you can't, you lose all the comments and the views and stuff. The closest to version control and code-driven video, I've seen Delba from the Vercel team. She's using it app. It's an open source thing, which is basically React to generate videos. Like you create, I don't know exactly how it works, but you can create transitions and kind of like you can do slides, there's like this slideshow tools or React Music that Ken Wheeler did to use the web audio API to create a sequencer and then the drum. But there's one to make videos where you have text and you can style it and you can say how long it stays on screen, and Delba makes these videos that it feels like it's done with After Effects and motion graphics, but it's all driven by code. So imagine if you make a mistake, you're like, oh, just do a PR and change the animation or the code sample here, and you can go and revise the stuff. So it feels like getting closer to revisable video making. But I love the process of like having raw footage, and it's like an art. You get clay and you just build something with it, and you never think about code anymore. It's more like the art directing the storytelling, and I don't think I want to do it in code just for that reason.
All right, Simon, you're done talking about editing. We're out of here. But before we go, do you have a sick pick for me this week, or do you need me to jump in?
Yes, I have a sick pick. I looked up and I thought of it yesterday. Literally, it's Wednesday today. Yesterday, I installed just above my head a ceiling fan with a LED light, and it's DC powered. I can't show it to you, but I can show you the remote that goes with it. It has a light. I don't think I'll use it much, but it's 3 color, like pure white and then mid yellow and very yellow, and you can change the intensity. So I might actually be able to use it as almost like feel ambient background light. It's above me, but it's like very broady. It's not like just on my head. And then it has a DC engine, and there's AC and DC, and basically DC is much more silent. It's a bit more expensive, but it's silent, and I don't have it on now because it's winter, but I can have it on level 2 out of 6, and it doesn't get picked up by the mic, even being above my head. Nice. So it's going to be such a nice addition if I can record and stream with a ceiling fan, because all the heat gets trapped there. Yeah, so shout out to, actually, not that it's going to drive business to him, but there's a guy called Miles, Thunder Electrical, Coffs Harbour. He's the most awesome. I had lots of tradies and electricians come. This guy is above and beyond the best, the coolest. I had my idea. I was like, I want it here. He was like, no, dude, you want it here because X reason, and then the airflow and also aesthetics and stuff. And he had so much to say about like delivering a polished experience and final product, and that was awesome.
My sick pick for this week is a game called Baldur's Gate 3. So I don't know. Are you into any games, Simon?
I'm into sports games a lot, not video games really. It's a time constraint thing more than anything.
Yeah. And I always have this issue with finding time to play games because of the same thing. It's a time constraint thing. There's a very small window of time in the evening where like me and my wife can just hang out without kids and stuff and do the things that we want to do. And in that time we want to hang out with each other. And so Baldur's Gate 3 is awesome because it's a couch co-op game. So that means that you can both sit there with a controller and play it on the same screen. And basically it's a Dungeons and Dragons game. So if you've ever played D&D, like I played a bunch of D&D as like a high school teen, and so it's like a really complex role-playing game where you can basically do anything. And there have been lots of iterations of trying to turn it into like the video game version of that, and I feel like Baldur's Gate 3 is the first time that they've like really nailed that. So if you like very, very large games that you can do anything, and you have like just endless things that
open canvas
spec out, and just like endless quests you can do and endless things, and you also have a friend that you want to play with either in the same room or just online, like you can play cooperatively with like people on the internet, I would highly recommend Baldur's Gate 2. It's awesome.
Nice. I like the co-op side of things. My wife is the furthest away from doing anything on a screen that you'll find. She's a camper, outdoors runner, athlete, running, trail running, dog running. And she looks at her phone a whole lot. I gotta say this, but it's always while doing something else. And we have a couch. I don't think I've seen her sit on the couch once. She can't sit still. So unless there's an outdoor, well, maybe we could do the actual real role play thing together. Because
that's true. Yeah.
The couch plus remote, it's gonna be a hard sell for me.
You just need to get some swords and things, and maybe some enemies out in the real world, and
heels to climb.
Well, thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Nav Bar. It's been fantastic hanging out with you again, Simon.
It was.
We have taken an episode that we thought would just be like a quick summary of our current recording setups, and it's blown out to like an hour and a half again.
We should know by now. We should know that video editing is a time consuming, and also time consuming to explain the intricacies of.
Like we're kind of like a tech podcast, and we always like frame it around tech stuff. But really, we probably spend more time tweaking our video editing stuff, and we spend more time on video production than we probably do actually writing code at this point. So
this is I think that's the skill that differentiates us, or like where you get really, really good at this. I think you and I both kind of stand out with that skill of like making really compelling videos. So it's kind of nice to show the thinking that goes behind it.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you for joining us live, to the people that are in the chat, and we will see you again next week.
Bye-bye.
See ya.